Hi everyone, hope you're having a great week. Our reading today comes from Luke's 6th chapter, verses 27 through 38. Jesus said, "But I say to you that listen, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you, and if anyone takes away your goods, do not ask for them again. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those around you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those that love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. And if you lend to those from whom you hope to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much gain. But love your enemies, do good, and lend, expecting nothing in return. Your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, for He is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over. It will be put into your lap, for the measure you give will be the measure you get back." The Gospel of the Lord. Let me tell you a story I read this week. It starts like this. I had a coworker named Dave who worked with me at my previous job. And man, this guy really rubbed me the wrong way. Was always taking credit for things that I did. Would complain about everything I said. He made it hard to even be in the same room. I just couldn't stand being around the guy. One day I found out that Dave had just been let go from his job. And you know what? I had this moment, a moment of truth where I thought, should I be happy about this? My first reaction was yes, justice has been served. But then, almost like a whisper in my heart, I remember Jesus saying, love your enemies. I had a choice. Was I going to throw a celebration party in my head, or was I going to really step up and be merciful? So here's what I did. I called Dave. I offered him support. I said, I know it's tough right now, but if you ever need any help, I'm here. And you know what happened? It didn't change Dave, but it changed me. And it didn't feel like a win in the moment, but I left that phone call feeling somehow lighter. This is the power of loving our enemies. It transforms us. And when we do it, we start to look a little more like Jesus. The idea started in the Old Testament in Proverbs 15:1. A soft answer turns away wrath, but harsh words stir up anger. When someone insults or belittles us, our natural instinct is to fight back, to use words that might cut deep. But what if instead we responded with a calm and kind reply? It would be disarming and quite unexpected. Today's teaching by Jesus takes this soft response idea to an entirely different level. Love your enemies and do good to those who hate you, he says. Take a moment to think about this. Who in your life feels difficult to deal with? Is there someone who just popped into your mind? Because let's face it, building relationships with people who are tough to handle is often one of our greatest challenges. Maybe you've dealt with a boss who's controlling or demeaning. I had a boss like that once. And while I've moved past the damage that was done, his words and his actions have stuck with me for years. Maybe you have a family member whose emotional needs drain you. Or maybe it's a neighbor or a coworker who just knows exactly how to push your buttons. We have all had people in our lives that are hard to love. I saw a quote this week that said this, I didn't mean to push all your buttons. I was just looking for mute. And isn't that just like human nature? When someone hurts us, we want to hurt them back. We want revenge. And sometimes we might even get really creative about it. But Jesus, in his wisdom and his experience, understood how to deal with people who hurt him. He was betrayed, he was insulted, he was belittled, and people tried to silence him. At one point, a group tried to throw him off a cliff, and eventually he was killed in a most atrocious way. And yet he shows us a very different path. In today's gospel reading, Jesus addresses an often misunderstood topic. How is it that we are to respond when people hurt us? And we've all heard Jesus teaching to love your enemies. But it's easy to think of enemies as people from history books. Stalin, Hitler, figures from far away. But what if we bring this teaching into our daily lives and apply it to those who are difficult for us? The people we encounter regularly, who challenge us continually sometimes. Many people misinterpret Jesus' words in today's passage. And they think that he's just telling us to be doormats, to just let people walk all over us. That is not the message at all. Jesus isn't teaching passivity or submission to abuse. Instead, he is teaching us to be creative and strong in our responses. Can we be people who reconcile with others instead of retaliate against them? Reconcile instead of retaliate. And Jesus continues in more detail. If someone strikes you on the cheek, turn the other also. Now, we might not experience physical slaps today, but we encounter insults and demeaning comments and slights. And when that happens, the two most common responses are either strike right back or shrink away in fear. And Jesus' response is neither of these. His is a rather unnatural response, which takes some effort and maybe some training in life to accomplish. His response is different. Don't run. Don't hit back. Instead, face the situation with strength and with courage, confronting the other person with honesty and patience. And Jesus gives us even more practical detail. If someone takes your cloak, don't stop them from taking your tunic. In Jesus' time, people often found themselves at the mercy of the legal system. And if someone sued you for something as small as your shirt, you were probably very poor with little else to offer. And Jesus flips the situation around entirely, and the context here is so important. If someone takes your outer garment and your inner garment too, you would be naked. And in that humiliation, the one who causes your shame becomes the one who is shamed. That's how it worked back then. So Jesus is not teaching passive acceptance. He is teaching active and creative defiance. By giving up everything, you force the other person to reckon with their own wrongs. It's a wonderful form of protest that harms no one, but instead invites the possibility of reconciliation. One thing that makes Christianity distinct is grace. The world often runs on a tit-for-tat system, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and Jesus says, no more of this. He says, live generously, live with grace, and never seek revenge. Martin Luther once wrote, grace is free, a gift from God, but it is not cheap. Jesus endured mistreatment, but we rarely take the time to think about how it connects to his teachings. On his last day, he was spit on, he was slapped, and he was mocked. He had his clothes taken from him. He was humiliated, and he was forced to carry a cross until he could carry it no more. And Jesus did not talk about getting even. He lived out forgiveness. Embodied it. He showed us that sometimes the only way to break a cycle of retaliation and hatred is through grace. A pastor was once asked a compelling question: what is the one thing the church has to offer that the world cannot offer? And listen to his response. You don't have to be a Christian to build homes or to feed the hungry. But the church offers grace, the kind of grace that says you don't deserve my forgiveness, but I'm giving it to you anyway. Now here's the point. Grace is a radical choice, and it's hard. It is far from being a doormat. This is about strength, about choosing reconciliation, even when it is the hardest option. And Jesus didn't give us formulas to follow. He showed us exactly how to live it out. Grace. He showed us how through painful sacrifice. He showed us that something greater can be born out of significant loss, and that our greatest endings can become our greatest beginnings. This path of reconciliation, of choosing grace over vengeance, this is the way of Jesus. It is the way that leads us to healing. It is not just for ourselves, it's for our families, our friends, it's for the world. A small business owner named Rachel tells a story about one of her employees. She ran a popular cafe in her town, and she hired a young man named Sam who seemed to be a very hard worker at first, but over time his performance really started to decline. He showed up late for work, he started making mistakes during his shifts, and his attitude grew very distant. And after a few weeks of this, she received a call from him, and he explained that he'd been struggling with some personal issues at home. Explained that actually his mother was terminally ill, and he was trying to take care of her while working and balancing life. Rachel was torn because it just was not working well. She had rules about reliability and punctuality, and she also understood these pressures that Sam was under. And instead of firing him, she chose to show him grace. She adjusted his schedule to give him more time with his mother, allowed him more flexibility, what he needed to cope with the situation. And she provided him with resources for counseling, encouraging him to take care of himself in the midst of all of this. And it was not an easy answer for her. In fact, it caused her a lot more work and disruption initially. And it really surprised Sam, because he had expected a reprimand or even a dismissal. But instead, Rachel's compassion and grace helped him to get back on his feet. And over time, he became one of her most reliable employees. His work ethic improved. And most importantly, he felt a deep sense of loyalty and gratitude toward Rachel. It showed up in effort over time. Grace and forgiveness go hand in hand. And it is all about the condition of our hearts. A few weeks ago, I got a phone call from someone that I'd never met who wanted to talk to me because he was deeply hurt in his life and said to me, "I don't know if I can forgive them." I said, "I get it. But forgiveness doesn't mean excusing their behavior. It means you are not letting that person control your heart anymore." This morning, if you take time and you think about this, who or what is it that controls your heart? And may we have the courage to pursue God's way of living, breaking these patterns of harm, and instead choose lives that are centered on healing even those people around us. Please pray with me. God, we are so grateful that when Jesus came, he taught us things that do not come naturally to our hearts. We thank you, Lord, for these responses that he gave, in this case, a third option, a better way of living, and not an easier way, but a better way. And God, I pray for each of us that you would work in our hearts and in our minds to help us to be creative in reconciliation in life. Help us, Lord, to love as you love us. Give us strength and give us wisdom. And may we know your peace and your joy forever. Amen.